Wigfrid is now the ultimate tank character and don't starve together, blocking 100% of damage, even if that damage is being delivered by the Moonblender 3000 TM or even Lunar Deerclops. But that's only one of Wigfrid's 23 new skills on her skill tree. All these new skills allow her to block, parry, teleport, regenerate her armor, store her songs, unlock new songs, play nicer with B-Flow, and unlock her new best-in-slot weapon, while also having some not-so-good skills, but we'll get to that. We will review all these skills, what they do, their hidden mechanics, what they're best used for, and finally, I will recommend 2 skill tree selections for Wigfrid. Firstly though, we will go over Wigfrid's powerful default abilities, which she gets without interacting with her skill tree at all, before we delve into her before-mentioned skill tree, explaining each skill in depth. Wigfrid's starting stats are a strong 200 health, 120 hunger, and 120 sanity. A warrior built for combat, it would seem. This is confirmed as she also starts with a few items, her battle helmet, a battle spear, and some meat. You'll also notice she has the most obnoxiously loud instrument for a voice. Good grief, why the starting meat? Well, Wigfrid is a cannibal. Wait, a carnivore. So she will only eat meat or crockpot dishes which require meat in their recipe, despite pierogi requiring vegetables in the crockpot recipe, since it also requires meat or eggs, Wigfrid can eat it. Wigfrid can also eat foods classified as goodies. This includes foods like jelly beans, ice cream, taffy, and every other item which says its food type is goodies in your scrapbook. This is only super impactful for the early game, as once you get crockpots, you'll have access to most of the best crockpot recipes in the game, which require meat or count as goodies. So Wigfrid still has access to great healing recipes and damage recipes like spicy Volt Goat Shao Froi. But in the early game, it means if you pick berries and carrots, you won't be able to eat them, unless of course you use them in a crockpot with some meat to make a meat crockpot recipe like meatballs. So you'll need to kill living creatures for their meat to satisfy your hunger. Good thing you started with some combat equipment being the battle spear and battle helm. The battle helm is an armor piece that only Wigfrid can craft, costing 2 gold and 2 rocks. It provides 80% physical damage reduction and has 525 durability, while also providing 20% water resistance. Despite Wigfrid being the only player with the ability to craft the helmet, she can give the helmet to her teammates for them to use too. 525 durability is 66% more durability than that of a football helmet, which also gives 80% damage reduction. So it's good to think about the battle helm as a football helmet which lasts longer, at least until we get to Wigfrid's skill tree. This will be your armor of choice for a while, depending on what armor you plan on unlocking later, but be mindful not to consume all of the golden rocks that your team have gathered just to make a mountain of helmets. No. The battle spear is a weapon that also only Wigfrid can craft, costing 2 twigs, 2 flint, and 2 gold. Using this weapon will deal 42.5 damage per hit, and it has 200 durability. So a mediocre weapon, but decent for the early game until you get better weapons like technical spikes, handbats, or dark swords. Otherwise, decently easy to mass produce to give to your team. But wait, if it deals 42.5 damage, how come Wigfrid is dealing 53.125 damage with it? Well, my child, that is because Wigfrid gets a 1.25 times physical damage multiplier by default and for free. So whatever damage Wilson would have dealt, multiply it by 1.25 times, and that's the damage Wigfrid will do. Though this only applies to physical damage, not planar, but we'll talk more about planar damage later. To put this buff into perspective, it makes a handbat for Wigfrid better than a dark sword for Wilson. But as we'll see, Wigfrid's damage multiplier is only the tip of the iceberg for her combat abilities. So let's now talk about Wigfrid's innate damage reduction. Wigfrid will take 25% less damage than a Wilson. But what exactly does this mean? And how does it work? How does it interact if I also have armor on? So if Wilson and Wigfrid have no armor and are both slapped by Deerclops, this would deal 75 damage to the Wilson, but Wigfrid's innate damage reduction takes the damage Wigfrid would have taken and then multiplies it by 0.75 times, reducing the 75 damage down to 56.25. That's pretty simple, but now what about combining it with armor? Well, if both Wilson and Wigfrid now wore battle helmets and got hit by Deerclops will try to deal 75 damage to Wilson, then the battle helm reduces the 75 by 80%, reducing it down to 15 damage, then Wilson would take 15 damage to his health. The battle helmet on Wigfrid will do the same thing, being it will reduce the 75 damage down to 15 damage, but when that 15 damage tries to hit Wigfrid's health, her innate damage reduction will reduce that health loss by 25% by multiplying the damage by 0.75 times. So Wigfrid would only take 11.25 damage. So Wigfrid's innate damage reduction applies absolutely last, as in whatever damage she would have taken after her armor reduces damage, her innate damage reduction then reduces that entire number by multiplying it by 0.75 times. Cool! This damage reduction also innately works against planar damage since it reduces the entire damage number before hitting Wigfrid's health, same as Woody's Moose, except Woody's Moose form has 90% true damage reduction, or what we'll call for the rest of the video, player resistance, whereas Wigfrid only has 25% player resistance. So Wigfrid deals a bit more physical damage than a Wilson and is tankier against all forms of damage, but that's not all. as now it gets a little complicated. Wigfrid's Health and Sanity Leeching effect. While hitting things, Wigfrid will regenerate health and sanity. This health and sanity regeneration amount is based on a few things: the mob you're fighting's damage, the mob's health, and the total base damage of the weapon you're using. So all the physical plus all the planar damage your weapon deals, while ignoring all damage multipliers. This is the specific formula, though the max health and sanity regen per attack is capped at 2, with a minimum cap of 0.33. Once again proving that the wiki is not always correct, shaking my head. As a few quick examples, all of which using a battle spear, versus a spider, Wigfrid will regenerate 2 health and sanity per hit, and versus a pigman, she will regenerate 1.4025 health and sanity per hit. This gets a little more complicated when the formula would generate a regeneration number less than 1. Like when fighting Deerclops, her original damage is 150, despite only hitting players with 75 damage. This means you regenerate 0.3984375 regeneration per hit on Deerclops. It then stores this regeneration number repeatedly every hit until it reaches 1 or more. Then once your stored regeneration surpasses 1, it then grants you the health and sanity regeneration and wipes the stored regeneration numbers. There are some slightly more complicated things going on here, being that if the regeneration amount isn't instantly granted, it is stored like we said, but that stored regeneration amount degrades if the time between your last attack and your next attack is between 3 and 5 seconds. After 3.01 seconds, it degrades by 0.2%, and after 4.99 seconds, it degrades by 39.8%, and after 5 seconds without attacking, your stored regeneration will get completely wiped. This is kind of hard to show in game without perfect timing, but if you have a 4-second delay between each attack, you will regenerate 1.24 health after hitting Dragonfly 4 times, rather than 1.32 health, so just trust me, bro. Also, you can mess with the spreadsheet I made in the description to see how it works. Also, thanks to Arkwell for helping me figure this out. I definitely didn't spend an entire day trying to figure out the mechanics for this leeching effect. No. So versus Deerclops, Wigfrid will generate 1.2 health and sanity every 3 hits. Then versus Dragonfly, Wigfrid will generate 1.32 health and sanity every 4 hits. In both scenarios, we are storing less than 1 regeneration per hit, but it doesn't degrade over time since the time between our hits is half second, which is much less than 3 seconds, and this repeats until we have stored at least 1 regeneration, at which point we gain the regeneration. What this ultimately tells us is that her health and sanity leeching effect is most effective when she's using a weapon with high total base damage and the enemy she's fighting has a low max health. So in the early to mid game, this health and sanity regeneration will carry you without the need to heal through other means. But versus bosses, it won't be enough to face tank the boss without other strategies. This health and sanity leeching effect enables a relaxed playstyle as you avoid insanity easily and you don't need to heal as much, but it can be utilized for great utility as well. Since you effectively heal for free, you don't need to spend as much time, if any, making healing food. In fact, Cat Person did a boss run with Wigfrid without using any crockpot dishes, so they relied on Wigfrid's health regeneration to stay alive throughout the whole run. This is a great showcase how Wigfrid's health regeneration can be used not to make the game easier, but instead to push the limits. Inspiration meter and songs. Wigfrid has a unique inspiration meter which fills in a similar manner to her previous ability, in that while she is fighting, she gains inspiration. This inspiration can be utilized to activate up to 3 passive songs at once for effects like health and sanity restoration for you and your team, along with one-off inspiration costs to activate songs with instant effects. These songs can only be crafted and activated by Wigfrid. Let's discuss the mechanics of gaining inspiration, then we will discuss each song, what they're good for, and which are the best. The amount of inspiration you gain per hit is based on the damage you dealt, how filled up your inspiration meter is already, and whether you're fighting a boss or not. So dealing 100 damage would grant you 2.4 inspiration, except if you already had some inspiration. If your inspiration meter was, for example, half full, then the formula dictates that the 2.4 inspiration you would have gained with an empty inspiration bar is now 1.2 inspiration. Then if you're fighting a boss, whatever this inspiration gain is, it gets tripled. So using a battle spear fighting Deerclops, it will take you 46 hits or about 23 seconds of attacking to surpass 83 inspiration. In English, this means you will gain inspiration faster when you deal more damage and even faster with an empty inspiration meter relative to a fuller inspiration meter. This is why once you have 90 or so inspiration, your inspiration gain is extremely slow since your inspiration gain is being reduced by 90%. Continuing the Deerclops example, it takes 46 hits to surpass 83 inspiration. But how many hits does it take to reach a full 100 inspiration? 80 hits? 100 hits? Nope, actually it would take a total of 254 hits from battle spears on Deerclops to reach a full 100 inspiration bar from 0. Luckily, you never need to go higher than 84 inspiration. We'll discuss why soon. Once you have not gained inspiration for 7.5 seconds, your inspiration will begin draining at a rate of 2 inspiration per second. But that's not all. You also gain inspiration when you take damage to your health. The formula is the same as the previous formula, except you swap out the damage you deal with the damage you took, and that inspiration gain isn't tripled if you took damage from a boss. This means the inspiration gain from taking damage is pretty brutal, as in bad. You need to take 100 damage 73 times, so 7,300 damage in total, to surpass 83 inspiration. But why specifically surpass 83 inspiration? Well, that's when you unlock your third passive song slot in your inspiration meter. Now let's talk about each song that Wigfrid has access to by default, what they do, and how they're best used. Wigfrid has 2 types of songs. Firstly, passive songs, which are activated with no inspiration cost but require require one of 3 thresholds to be met to unlock a passive song slot on her inspiration meter. These thresholds are unlocked after reaching 16.667 inspiration, 50 inspiration, and 83.333 inspiration. So basically 17 inspiration, 50 inspiration, and 84 inspiration. After activating one of these thresholds and activating a passive song, that passive song attaches to that inspiration threshold. If you lose that inspiration threshold due to your inspiration dropping below it, the song will deactivate and must be reactivated manually once you unlock the threshold again. Only one song can be attached to each inspiration threshold, so you can only ever have a maximum of 3 passive songs active at one time. Every passive song's effect will affect Wigfrid, players around Wigfrid, and followers around Wigfrid. The songs will affect a 3-tile radius around Wigfrid, and once those affected move more than 3 tiles away, a short time after it will stop affecting them until they get within a 3-tile radius again. You can tell if a song is affecting someone or something because they'll have a little musical note above their head occasionally. Wow. The second type of song will consume a flat amount of inspiration to activate its effect instantly and doesn't take up any inspiration meter thresholds. Now let's talk about the specific songs themselves, starting with the passive songs. Every song requires papyrus and a feather pencil to craft, but the last ingredient is different. Weaponized Warble. For the Weaponized Warble, you need a sewing kit to craft it. Once activated, this song will reduce the durability loss of weapons, including fire and ice staffs. This durability loss unfortunately does not extend to every weapon slot item such as weatherpanes. The durability loss reduction is 25%, so your dark sword that would last for 100 hits by default will now last for 134 hits. So the default durability divided by 0.75 equals the new durability. Wow. Pretty simple song, and if you have nothing better to use, this song is good as it saves your resources by making your weapons last longer, along with saving inventory slots as you may need to bring less weapons because of this song. Heartrending Ballad. This song requires a life-giving Yamlet as its third ingredient to craft, and its effect is, it grants each player and follower around Wigfrid 1 health regeneration every time they land a hit on an enemy, including hitting the craftable punching bag dummy. This is an incredibly powerful effect, as if you're in a team, everyone will now generate up to 120 health per minute if they're continually attacking. That's a lot of healing. But it isn't as good as it seems for Wigfrid. As for Wigfrid, she already has natural health regeneration, so the song only provides her an additional 0.5 health per hit that she lands, not the full 1 health per hit. This is still very good though. This 0.5 health overrides the natural health regeneration cap of 2 per hit, so you will gain up to 2 health per hit naturally, plus the 0.5 per hit from the song. This will debatably be your most used song, so definitely craft it as it can regenerate a ton of healing for you, your team, and your followers. Clear-minded Cadenza. This song requires moon moth wings, which you can acquire from chopping down a loon tree on Lunar Island and killing the moon moth that spawns from the tree. This song is arguably the best for you and your team, as its effect is, every hit you land on an enemy, you gain 1 sanity. Very simple, but incredibly impactful, as now you and your team won't go insane during boss fights due to gaining up to 120 sanity per minute. But more importantly, what effect in the game costs sanity to increase your damage at an exact rate of 1 sanity per attack? The Enlightened Crown. Dropped by Celestial Champion, this crown gives you a plus 10 sanity per minute aura while wearing it, and while your sanity is above 85% of your maximum, it will activate, giving you a light radius. But more importantly, every time you land a hit on an enemy, the crown will drain your sanity by 1, then launch a gestalt at the enemy, dealing 42.5 damage if it hits. Normally this crown is good, but doing 120 attacks per minute would drain 120 sanity. The crown restores 10 sanity per minute, so then you need to restore 110 sanity per minute to upkeep the crown's damage, which costs resources via sanity food and costs your DPS since you need to stop fighting to eat the sanity food. But with Clear-minded Cadenza active and wearing the Enlightened Crown, every time you land a hit, the crown will drain 1 sanity and launch a gestalt at the enemy. Then the song will immediately restore the lost 1 sanity since you landed a hit on an enemy, and this applies to every player around you, so your crown's damage will stay active for free and it won't cost you any time. This song is what makes the Enlightened Crown such a big damage boost. To put the damage boost into perspective, a Wilson with a Dark Sword would be dealing 68 damage per hit, but now with their Enlightened Crown and being affected by the song, they would be dealing 68 damage per hit with a Gestalt dealing 42.5 damage per hit, totaling 110.5 damage per hit, assuming the Gestalt hits, which is a damage increase of 62.5%. That's an absurd damage increase, especially when you consider that it's completely free once you have the items to do it. So yeah, this is what makes Wigfrid really good, being able to easily upkeep the Enlightened Crown for a big DPS boost. We'll talk more about Wigfrid's damage potential later, but for now, I'll note that since you can keep the Enlightened Crown up for free 100% of the time using this song, the Enlightened Crown is almost always Wigfrid's best in slot helmet for damage. Bel Canto of Courage. The Bel Canto of Courage requires a thulecite medallion to craft, which can be acquired by crafting it at any pseudoscience station in the ruins. This song's effect is it simply cuts all sanity auras in half for Wigfrid and everyone nearby. This is not nearly as good as Clear-minded Cadenza, but using that song in combination with this song may be required if you want to keep your sanity maxed out versus an enemy like Deerclops or Agent Fuelweaver, who both have a massive 400 sanity drain per minute if you're stood directly underneath them, or you can just not stand directly underneath them. Simply stepping back a little bit will keep you within attack range while decreasing the sanity aura drastically. So So even if you're using the Enlightened Crown as Wigfrid versus Deerclops with clear-minded cadenza, your sanity will stay above 85% for long enough to kill Deerclops without using Bel Canto of Courage. So yeah, not super useful unless you're with a team versus a very high sanity or a boss like Agent Fuelweaver. Fireproof Falsetto costs 1 Spittlefish? Spittlefish. Yeah, I wouldn't know what this fish is either, except I spend way too much time around Pearl. You can fish the spittlefish near seaweeds using a sea fishing rod and a stupefying lure, although someone told me that seeds work, but I couldn't for the life of me catch one of these spittlefish using seeds, so I think they were lying to me. Usually some seaweeds will spawn close to Pearl's Island, and the spittlefish spawn once the seaweeds squirt out some juices, and the fish eat the juices. Let's move on. The song's effect was buffed with Wigfrid's skill tree update, and now it provides complete immunity to fire damage. So if you're on fire or close to a fire with this song active, you and your team will not receive any fire damage, though your temperature will still increase from being too close to fire, and the song doesn't negate overheating damage. This also has an effect on followers. They will no longer take fire damage, but they will still panic while they are on fire, unfortunately. This is a good song when there is a risk of you taking fire damage, basically only versus Dragonfly, otherwise you probably won't be carrying the song around with you. Now for the non-passive songs. Rude Interlude. Rude Interlude requires a Toma root to craft and costs 16.66667. 16.667 inspiration to cast, so basically 17 inspiration to cast. The song's instant effect once cast is it will get all enemies' aggression within a 3-tile radius onto the caster of the song, even those enemies who weren't attacking anyone and were neutral. If you use this song near allied creatures like a befriended pigman or merm, this song will not make them aggressive, and this song has no effect on bosses. Given how aggression works in Don't Starve Together, being whatever or whoever hit the enemy last is the person the enemy will target, this song isn't super useful. It does draw the aggro to Wigfrid, but then as soon as anyone hits the aggroed enemy, the enemy will target that other player immediately. So not super useful unless you want to aggro a big group of enemies at once away from your team. Startling Soliloquy, I don't know how to say it, sorry, requires a purple gem to craft and also requires 16.6667, basically 17 inspiration, to cast. Its effect is it will make all creatures within a 3-tile radius panic for 4 seconds. If a creature is befriended, this song has no effect, and the song has no effect versus bosses. If a creature is attacking something and then panics due to this song, the creature will retain its aggro once it stops panicking. This song has such a long cast time that only 4 seconds of AoE panic is not a very big payoff, but it can be used to disperse lots of minions for a boss, most notably against Bee Queen. To contrast the small 4-second panic time, Maxwell's Shadow Trap makes all creatures panic in a small area for 12 seconds, 3 times longer than Wigfrid's song, so this song isn't super good but definitely has some use cases. There are 3 more songs which are unlocked on Wigfrid's skill tree, but we'll talk about them once we get to them in the skill tree section. Speaking of skill tree section, it's time! Now that we've covered all of Wigfrid's default abilities which make her very strong, tanky, and resource efficient, now let's discuss all her skill tree skills. Here I come to tell you about something epic. Whoa, I cut it close with that tree there. Oh, goodness gracious. Hello, I am Banjo the Business Pig, and I have a question for you. You know in your character animated short when you had a fantasy about killing a dragon made of criticism before being dragged into the constant?
Yeah, I remember.
Does this mean your fantasy is to slay dragons?
Well, no.
And since you got dragged into the constant immediately after that, would you say that killing that dragon was your final fantasy? Final Fantasy XIV Online also has dragons, and Square Enix made the mistake of sponsoring the channel before, and they have come back for more punishment. Final Fantasy XIV Online is an online MMORPG game where you too can adopt a dragon, although I haven't got deep enough into the game to achieve this, but surely one day. Create your pink-haired cat girl like I did in the previous Final Fantasy XIV Online sponsor spot. Actually, Square Enix informed me that the race Aura, so this girl, they're actually closer to dragons in appearance, not cats, but their origin are still long disputed in the lore. Wow, dragons are hot. And jump into the game to do quests, kill things, level up, and acquire better gear. But not too fast, since in the most recent game's keynotes, they announced their newest expansion, Dawn Trail TM, set to launch this summer. In this brand new expansion to the game, you'll be able to play a new job called the Pictomancer, which is said to be a magical ranged DPS who uses a paintbrush to attack. But before I could finish writing this part of the script about the new job as being the Pictomancer and the Viper, I got distracted because this new boss looks sick, because it looks like a mix between a dragon and a demon. Wow, very cool. I love good looking bosses. Yummy. Right. Anyway, click the link in the description if you want to play Final Fantasy XIV Online for free up to level 70 with no restrictions on game time. And thanks again to Square Enix for sponsoring the video. So will you final your fantasy with me, Miss Wiggles? She's crazy. I gotta get out of here. And Wigfrid just killed Banjo. Wow, that's amazing. Firstly, to unlock all 15 of your skill points, you must survive 160 days as Wigfrid in total, or you can use a command and cheat like me here, and do C_skip open parentheses 160 close parentheses to unlock all of the points immediately. Anyway, the order in which I will review these skills will be such that they are given enough context to understand each of them as much as possible, so don't worry, I will cover them all, but seemingly in a non-intuitive order. So let's get started with the headliner section. Encore. With an insight point and after playing a B-flow horn, you can unlock Encore. This skill unlocks the battle song called Warrior's Reprise. Warrior's Reprise costs the normal papyrus and feather pencil, with the third ingredient being 3 down feathers to craft. So you won't be crafting this song until a few days into spring, even if you get a down feather from Claw's sack in winter, since you require 3 feathers, while Claw's only gives you 1. This song is an instant effect song which costs 83.333. Basically, it requires 84 inspiration to cast, okay? For it to cost so much, it must have a good effect, right? Well, this song does not disappoint, as its effect upon casting is, it will revive up to 2 teammates within a 3-tile radius around the caster, prioritizing those closest first. Although it doesn't always prioritize the first person who's closest, but like most of the time it does. I'm not sure, I couldn't really find out in the code, sorry. Those who get revived from this song will find themselves with 1/3 of their health, half of their sanity, and 2/3 of their hunger restored. This is an incredibly powerful song, as the revive doesn't give any max health penalty and is essentially free as long as you have the inspiration to cast it. It would take Wigfrid hitting a boss with her battle spear 47 times to reach enough inspiration, so above 83.3 inspiration to cast the song. Those 47 hits would take you about 23 seconds to deliver. So this song can be cast extremely often. It can be cast even more often if you were using a higher damage weapon like a dark sword. So if you're in a team of people fighting some boss like Dragonfly, you can revive 2 teammates every 14 or so seconds. That's pretty good. Now of course it does consume the inspiration cost of basically 84 inspiration, which will consume all 3 passive song slots. Goodness gracious, that's so hard to say. Will consume all 3 passive song. Oh my goodness. Will consume all 3 passive song slot thresholds on your inspiration meter. There we go. We got there finally. Unless you have a perfect 100 inspiration, in which case 1 passive song would stay up. So basically, any passive song you had active will become deactivated once you cast this song, as you will consume most of your inspiration to cast the song. Not to worry though, as you'll have those passive songs back in action fast depending on what weapon you're using. Your inspiration will go up even faster with some skills we'll talk about later on, at which point we'll see how fast you can activate her revive song repeatedly. Anyway, this song is very good and slightly balanced since you can't obtain the ingredients for it until spring, and you know, when your teammates die, they drop everything on death, which is kind of annoying to pick back up in the middle of a fight. But yeah, if you're in a team, definitely unlock this skill. Battle Cool Canister. The Battle Cool Canister skill can be unlocked with a skill point and after having 6 different songs in your inventory. This skill unlocks the crafting recipe for the Battle Cool Canister. Wow, who would have guessed? This canister is expensive as it requires 2 boards, 3 gold, 2 azure feathers, and 2 beeswax. Azure feathers can only be acquired from snowbirds, which only spawn in winter on certain turfs, a couple of examples being grassy and savanna turf, so you won't be crafting this until winter. And the beeswax can be made by refining honeycomb from beehive at an alchemy engine, so you must destroy 2 beehives for the honeycomb. But once you have crafted it, it's an inventory item that can be opened, which will make it drop to the floor and allows you to store up to 8 of Wigfrid's songs in it. But not only store or take them out, but during battle you can quickly open the Battle Cool Canister and cast a song directly from the canister before picking it back up and continuing on. Unless you're on a B-flow, then you can't cast from the canister. You just drop it and then you can't open it. Be careful though, as like I said, opening the canister drops it on the floor and it is not immune to being set on fire. So remember to pick it back up. If it does burn, it's not the end of the world, as your songs will be thrown out of the canister and the songs are not flammable, so they will be safe. Otherwise, this is a fine skill, but you won't keep it unlocked, as once you unlock it and craft the canister, you can use the Celestial Portal and a Moonrock Idol to respawn as Wigfrid, but reassign your skill points so that you don't have the skill unlocked anymore. Even with the skill not learnt, you can still use the battle canister, you just can't craft another one. The same does not work for the Encore song though. To use that song, you must have the skill unlocked. We're skipping the fighting words skill until a little later on, but we will cover it, don't you worry. Moving on to the arsenal section, starting with Bragi's Blessing Juan, which says inspiration gain rate will increase a little when attacking using battle spears. This is very simple skill which does exactly what it says. Specifically though, it takes whatever inspiration you would have gained, then multiplies it by 1.25, so you get 25% more inspiration than if you didn't have the skill activated. As a quick comparison, before it took you 47 hits with a battle spear versus a boss to surpass 83.33 inspiration, which unlocks your 3rd passive song slot, but with this skill active, it will now only take you 37 hits, so about 21% less hits than before. Cool. Next on this branch is Bragi's Blessing 2, which does the exact same as Bragi's Blessing 1, but the multiplier is now 1.5 rather than 1.25, so you gain 50% more inspiration than without any skills. As a quick comparison, to surpass 83.33 inspiration, it now takes 31 hits with a battle spear compared to 37 hits with the level 1 skill and 47 hits with no skills. So if doing 47 hits took 23 seconds, 31 hits would take 15 seconds, meaning with the level 2 skill, you can surpass 83.33 inspiration in 65% of the time it would take with no skill. Cool. These skills by themselves are kind of whatever because they only work with battle spear weapons and not any other weapon, but this branch of the skill tree has more to offer, and these skills are just prerequisites to the next upcoming weapons, which also count as battle spears. The Elding Spear. Unlocking this allows you to craft, you guessed it, the Elding Spear. This spear requires 2 twigs, 1 beefalo wool, and oh no, 2 Vault Goat horns. Oh no. The first 2 ingredients are easy to get, but 2 Vault Goat horns is pretty expensive since Vault Goats only respawn once every 2.5 days per herd and only have a 25% chance of dropping a horn. So you'll need to kill, on average, 8 Vault Goats. Wow. But it will be worth it as long as you didn't need those Vault Goat horns for something else like Weather Panes. Once crafted, this spear seemingly does the exact same damage as a fresh handbat, being 59.5 multiplied by Wigfrid's 1.25 times damage multiplier, so 75.375 damage. But the spear has a little secret, that being it is an electric weapon, which means it has electric damage built into it. Electric damage gives you a free 1.5 times damage multiplier against dry enemies, but a 2.5 times damage multiplier against wet enemies. Except I don't know why, but the devs implemented the spear's electric damage slightly differently than usual electric damage, so ignore the 2.5 times damage multiplier and only remember the 1.5 times damage multiplier, which in this case only gets applied versus wet enemies, and neither multiplier is applied versus dry enemies when using the Elding Spear. So the damage we just dealt, being 74.375 damage, is the spear's default damage multiplied by Wigfrid's 1.25 times damage buff. But once we're fighting a wet enemy, your 59.5 damage is multiplied by 1.5 times of fighting a wet target and Wigfrid's 1.25 damage multiplier, so now you're dealing 111.5625 damage per hit. Wigfrid using a Dark Sword versus a wet enemy would only deal 85 damage per hit, so the Elding Spear will deal 31.25% more damage than a Dark Sword versus a wet enemy. Players other than Wigfrid can use the spear, but only Wigfrid can craft it. Also, electric damage doesn't stack, so if you eat Wali's Vault Goat Freud, which usually gives you electric damage, it won't do anything for you since your weapon is already an electric weapon, and thus is already dealing electric damage. But now comes the not so good news. There is no way to recharge this spear in its current state. So once you use up all 150 uses, it will break and disappear. Unless you deconstruct it with a deconstruction staff before the spear gets to 50% durability, then you'll get all the ingredients back and you can craft it again. But if you deconstruct it once it's at or below 50% durability, you only get half the ingredients back. But this is a pretty expensive way to recraft this weapon, so I don't know if you want to do that. So I wouldn't recommend this weapon yet, as the next 2 skills drastically improve the weapon and make it Wigfrid's best in the slot most of the time. The Elding Spear Enhancement 1 enables a special attack for your Elding Spear. While wearing the spear, upon right-clicking somewhere with no right-click option, you will be shown an arrow on the floor. Then left-clicking in any direction will perform a short animation before Wigfrid teleports in the direction of the arrow and deals area of effect electric damage to everything in her path. The cooldown of this special attack is 3 seconds. This cooldown is applied once you teleport and when you equip the spear, so unequipping and equipping it again will apply the cooldown, so you can't swap between multiple spears to constantly special attack. The special attack also does not consume durability. Since the special attack is unlocked with Wigfrid's skills, other players can't use the special attack, but they still can use the baseline spear. Due to this, now when we discuss the spear's damage, it will be with Wigfrid's damage multiplier already included. The special attack deals 85 damage, but of course is electric damage, so versus a wet target will deal 127.5 damage. The area of effect of this special attack is 3 wall units wide centered on your position, and 7 to 8 wall units in the direction the attack is cast. This is quite a large area for the attack, and it's perfect for running away from a horde of enemies and turning around to special attack back through the line of enemies. This special attack is a true teleport in that you can teleport through obstacles as long as your destination is like walkable. So you can cut across land or through objects with collision for free using the special attack. Although jumping across biomes by teleporting over the world generated gaps are usually a little too wide to be able to teleport across, but sometimes you can, which is particularly useful in the caves. Also, despite what some people have told me, Wigfrid does teleport, but at no point during the animation is there any invulnerability frames, as in you start at one location and instantly teleport to another without at any point going invulnerable. So you can use the teleport to dodge an attack by teleporting away or behind enemies, but if your teleport destination is within range of the enemy's attack, they will still hit you. Also, if you're being staggered too much by lots of enemies, then casting the special attack may be troublesome, as in it's kinda hard, but once you start the special attack animation, it cannot be interrupted by any kind of stagger, except knockback attacks, and attacks which cause you to drop your weapon. This will force you out of the special attack animation and interrupt it. DPS wise, it's better to just hold F and do a normal attack rather than special attacking, unless your special attack would hit more than one enemy. enemy. So now the spear is more than just being better than a handbat, as it gives you area of effect damage, and that special attack doesn't cost any durability. But there's one last skill that improves the spear even more. The Elding Spear Enhancement 2 allows Wigfrid to use a restrained stack on the spear in her inventory to upgrade it. This gives the spear a flat 20 planar damage on top of its normal damage for its normal and special attack, and it also grants 20% movement speed now. This movement speed buff is probably there since you are punished for equipping and unequipping the spear for, say, like a walking cane, since it restarts the special attack cooldown. Speaking of the cooldown, after you upgrade to the charged Elding Spear, the cooldown for your special attack is now 1.5 seconds instead of 3 seconds, and the durability of the spear is now 200 uses rather than 150. But how do you obtain the restrained stack to upgrade the spear? This restrained stack is obtained by plugging all 3 celestial altars into Lunar Island in a triangle shape and then completing an experiment for inside the moonstorms, after which you get a restrained stack. This means you must basically unlock Celestial Champion to get the item to upgrade your spear. Now, your spear is called a charged Elding Spear, and wait, I intentionally ignored a part of the last skill's text because it only works after unlocking this skill. Let's see what it says. If the special attack of a charged Elding Spear hits a target, it repairs the spear. So finally, you can repair the spear and it doesn't cost you anything. Wow. Hitting one enemy with the charged spear's special attack will generate 4 durability or 2%, but hitting more than one enemy will generate 8 durability or 4%. So if you're fighting more than one enemy, you only need to special attack once every 8 normal attacks to keep your spear's durability topped up. Otherwise, you must special attack once every 4 attacks to make it sustainable, as this is your only way to recharge the spear. When you're fighting one enemy, it's still better DPS to constantly normal attack than to special attack every 1.5 seconds. But to keep your durability up, you must special attack. So what should you do? I think using the spear's normal attack in a 1v1 situation is best, while using the special attack opportunistically to dodge attacks by teleporting away, through, or behind enemies. Then have a spider or bee farm close to your base to recharge your spear later by special attacking multiple targets, since unfortunately special attacking punching bags does not work for recharging your spear. Best in slot? The answer is mostly yes, but it depends. This weapon deals the same physical damage as a handbat but gains 20 planar damage on top of that, which means its total damage is 94.375 when used by Wigfrid. It's important to note that Wigfrid's innate damage multiplier is a physical damage multiplier, so it does not buff the planar damage of the weapon. So the weapon's damage is 59.5 multiplied by 1.25 plus 20 planar damage. So what scenario does a different weapon perform better than the charged Elding Spear? Well, I think it's time for some Excel gaming. So using a Void Cowl and Void Reaper and achieving a hit streak of 6, you'll be dealing 99.25 damage against a regular enemy, 52.25 damage of which is physical, and the other 47 is planar. In the same scenario, but using the charged Elding Spear, Wigfrid will deal 74.38 physical damage and 20 planar damage, totaling 94.375 damage. So seemingly, Void Reaper and Void Cowl have a higher damage potential. But wait, the Void Reaper requires the Void Cowl to achieve the damage I just said. So what helmet could I use to buff the charged Elding Spear? Well, we have 2 options, the Warbe's Headgear or the Enlightened Crown. Let's start with the Warbe's Headgear. This headgear will target an enemy that you attack and give you a physical damage buff. After 20 seconds, the helmet will become fully charged and grant its full 20% physical damage buff. So let's assume you have the full buff. You'll be dealing a total of 109.25 damage, 89.25 damage of that is physical, while the remaining 20 is planar. So that is instantly better than the Void Reaper and Cowl versus a non-planar enemy. But what about the Enlightened Crown? Like we discussed earlier, the Enlightened Crown is easy to upkeep at 100% uptime due to Wigfrid's Clear-Minded Cadenza song, so we'll safely assume that every attack we land will trigger a Gestalt attack. This means we'll be dealing the regular spear damage of 74.375 physical and 20 planar damage, but the Gestalt will also be dealing 42.5 physical damage per hit, so our total damage is 136.875. So Void Cowl and Reaper max damage was 99.25, Warbe's Headgear and Spear was 109.25, and Spear plus Enlightened Crown is 136.88. Well, 136.875. That's almost 38% more damage than the Void Cowl and Reaper combo. So as long as you're using the Enlightened Crown, the Spear is always the best. Right? Well, there's a little bit more depth to be investigated, because what if we were fighting a planar entity enemy? Then all of our physical damage gets reduced. So what's the best now? Well, against a planar enemy, assuming there's no allegiance bonuses, which we'll talk about later, the best combination is still Wigfrid's charged Elding Spear and the Enlightened Crown. This combination versus a planar entity deals a total of 93.24 damage per hit, assuming the Enlightened Crown's Gestalt also hits, while the second best is the Void Reaper and Cowl, dealing 81.09 damage per hit, so about 87% of the damage of the Spear and the Crown. Meanwhile, the Warbe's Headgear and Spear combination lag behind, dealing 70.07 damage per hit, which is barely better than just the Spear, which deals 64.05 damage per hit. The Crown is significantly better than the Warbe's Headgear anyway, but especially against a planar entity, since planar entities reduce the physical damage dealt to them, reducing it more as your physical damage increases, but this is per hit, and since the Crown is its own individual hit, the sum of the physical damage isn't reduced as much, whereas the Warbe's Headgear multiplies up your weapon's physical damage, leading it to be reduced more. I hope that made sense. So that's kind of it. Here's the full Excel gaming, which is also in the description if you want to make a copy and play around with it. Wigfrid's Spear is always the best in slot if you're using the Enlightened Crown with it, no matter the enemy you're fighting. But if you don't use the Enlightened Crown with it, then using Void Cowl and Reaper is better against planar enemies, and against non-planar enemies, Warbis is better than Void, Reaper, and Cowl. Also, funny interaction between the Enlightened Crown and the Elding Spear special attack. Since the special attack counts as a physical hit and attack, it triggers the Crown to unleash as many Gestults as you hit enemies. So if you special attack 20 Hounds, 20 Gestults will be unleashed. Also, since the special attack counts each enemy you hit, you gain all the sanity back from the Crown when using the Clear-Minded Cadenza. Although this might be a bug and might get fixed, so But after saying all this, since the spear is already an electric weapon, it cannot gain an external electric damage buff, but any other weapon can get this electric damage buff. If you have access to Spicy Vault Goat Schaufroid, then using a Dark Sword with the electric damage buff and the chili spice buff is always better than Wigfrid's spear, even if the spear is also buffed with chili spice. Whether the enemy is wet, dry, planar, shadow, lunar, or any combination of those factors, the Dark Sword with the Spicy Vault Goat jelly will always be more damage. But yeah, that's enough DPS talk until later. Moving on. Now we're heading back to the headliner section, specifically looking at fighting words. The skill requires you to perform 10 Battle Stingers, which are the instant effect songs, then you can unlock the skill. The skill itself says Battle Stingers will no longer consume inspiration and instead have a cooldown. Now when I first read this, I thought, wow, this is bad. And my opinion hasn't really changed, so let me explain why I think this skill is more so a negative than a positive. Normally, reading an instant effect song will consume a portion of your inspiration, 16.67 inspiration for Startling Soliloquy and Rune Interlude, while Warrior's Reprise consumes 83.34 inspiration. But now you can cast songs, but your inspiration is not consumed. Then Startling Soliloquy and Rune Interlude go on a 15-second cooldown, while Warrior's Reprise goes on a huge 3-minute cooldown. But a hidden requirement for casting these songs with the skill active are, you still actually require the inspiration cost to be able to cast them, just with the skill enabled, it won't consume the inspiration. So if you want to use Warrior's Reprise to revive some teammates, you still need 83.34 inspiration to cast it. It just won't eat the inspiration. So if you still require the inspiration, what's the point? Also, the Warrior's Reprise cooldown is so long that I'm going to do some math to show you why this skill is kind of bad in combination with this song. With your Battle Spear and no skills enabled, you can surpass 83.33 inspiration in 47 hits, or about 23 seconds versus a boss. This means you can cast Warrior's Reprise every 23 seconds by consuming your inspiration. With the skill enabled, you can only cast the song once every 3 minutes, so 7.8 times less often than without the skill. But that's not all, since if you have the charged Elding Spear and therefore do more damage, and have the increased inspiration gain skills enabled, then since the charged Elding Spear also counts as a Battle Spear, it will grant you increased inspiration gain. So using that weapon's damage and your Battle Spear inspiration skills, you can now surpass 83.33 inspiration with only 17 hits, or about 8.5 seconds while fighting a boss. So you can revive 2 teammates every 10 or so seconds, accounting for the song's animation time, compared to once every 3 minutes. So you can see why I don't really like this cooldown skill. Without the skill, you'd be able to use this song in this scenario about 18 times in 3 minutes. The one major downside of not using the skill, which I've ignored until now, is if you had 3 passive songs attached to your inspiration meter, with the cooldown skill, those 3 passive songs will remain activated even after you cast Warrior's Reprise or any other instant effect song, since it didn't drain your inspiration. But without the skill, it will of course drain your inspiration, causing the drain to knock out all 3 passive song slots until you regain inspiration and cast them all again. I don't think this is a huge deal. Casting Warrior's Reprise revives 2 teammates, and then you and your team lose your first song's buff for 1 second, your second song for 4 seconds, and your third song for like 9 or so seconds. So yeah, I wouldn't unlock this skill unless you plan on making more than 18 individual Warrior Reprise books. That way you can cast them more often than gaining inspiration to repeatedly cast one song multiple times. Or of course you can just unlock it because you like the skill. That's totally fine. This is just my opinion. Hard Helm I states that battle helms will be more durable when worn by Wigfrid. More specifically, Wigfrid's helmets will lose 10% less durability while being worn by a Wigfrid with the skill enabled. So normally Wigfrid's helmet has 525 durability, and it technically still has 525 durability, but it loses 10% less, so has an effective 583.333 durability or health. Epic. Hard Helm II simply increases how durable Wigfrid's helmets are again, this time by making them lose 20% less durability. So now her helmet has an effective 656.25 health or durability while being worn by Wigfrid with the skill enabled. Now we have the Commander's Helmet. This skill, unsurprisingly, unlocks a crafting recipe for a helmet called the Commander's Helmet. It costs 2 gold, 2 beeflo wool, and 1 marble to craft, so not too expensive, and this helmet has 682.5 durability, but is affected by the previous helmet durability buffs. This helmet has 35% water resistance, so 15% more than the battle helmet, and provides 60 winter insulation, which is the same insulation as the cat cap, so not too big, but noticeable. This helmet also provides the same 80% damage reduction, so a more durable battle helmet, but the Commander's Helm also reduces the impact of knockback attacks. What are knockback attacks? Knockback attacks are done by bosses like the Nightmare Werepig and the new Shark boss out to sea. These attacks normally throw you back and into the air, disrupting any attacks or actions you were doing beforehand. But with this helmet equipped, you are only briefly pushed up into the air and aren't thrown back. So it keeps you in the fight better when you're hit by a knockback attack, which makes some bosses' mechanics like the Sharks substantially easier to deal with. So this helmet is kind of whatever at the moment, though you can give it to teammates to use, but they don't benefit from the extra extra durability like Wigfrid, nor will your teammates benefit from the next two skills. Commander's Helmet Enhancement 1 says the Commander's Helmet now has protection against planar damage. More specifically, the helmet now has 8 planar defense built into it. So as a quick example, if Crystal Decops hit Wigfrid with an Icicle attack which normally deals 100 physical and 30 planar damage, but Wigfrid was wearing a Commander's Helmet but without the skill, she would be dealt 37.5 damage. The planar damage here is being reduced due to Wigfrid's innate player resistance, remember, yes. With the skill enabled, however, she would be hit for 31.5 damage. So yeah, Wigfrid's tanking math was quite fun to work out, so I have a spreadsheet that you can mess with if you want to in the description. I think it's worth exploring a little later when we will talk more about planar damage resistance, so wait till then. The last Commander Helm upgrade is Commander Helm Enhancement 2, wow, these names are really creative, which says Wigfrid's natural healing ability will repair her Commander's Helmet when she continues to fight at maximum health. This is a really neat ability, since if you were full health and attacking a spider, you would no longer get anything extra out of your natural health regeneration ability, but now if you have the Commander's Helm equipped and it isn't 100% durability, and your health is full, any health you would have gained gets multiplied by 3.5 times, and that amount of health is added to your helmet as durability. This means your helmet can regenerate just like you, but tanking things will probably mean you can't heal your helmet fast enough so it will break. Otherwise it's a good upgrade as it makes your helmet last longer or forever if you're careful. In a practical example, when hitting a spider with your default battle spear, you gain 2 health and sanity back per hit. If your health is full and your helmet is lower than 100% durability, your helmet will gain 7 durability per hit, which equates to 1.02% durability gain per hit. So depending on what you're fighting, your helmet could regenerate very fast. But what other helmet also regenerates by itself? The Dreadstone helmet, of course! This helmet can be obtained by getting the blueprint for it from defeating the Nightmare Werepig and crafting it using Dreadstone and Pure Horror. The helmet provides 90% physical damage reduction as opposed to the Commander Helmet's 80%, but only provides 5 planar defense, whereas the Commander Helm's skill gives it 8 planar defense. And the Dreadstone helmet has a maximum durability of 840, compared to the Commander Helmet's effective durability of 853.125. So they have similar durability, but the Dreadstone helmet providing more physical damage reduction will tend to have it absorbing more damage and therefore losing durability faster than the Commander's helmet. So the Dreadstone helm restores durability at a rate of 1% every 10 to 14 seconds, faster the lower your sanity is, or even faster if you're also wearing the Dreadstone body armor, increasing the durability recovery to between 1% every 6.7 to 10 seconds, again faster the lower your sanity. And the Dreadstone helmet recovers durability in and out of combat at the same rate. So Dreadstone helmet versus Commander's helm. Well, in every scenario I checked, the Dreadstone helmet will protect you from the most damage due to its larger 90% physical damage reduction, even versus planar enemies, the most extreme example being hit by the Ink White Rook's pound attack. Each hit deals 20 planar and 20 physical, so with the Commander's helm, Wigfrid will take 12 damage per attack, whereas with the Dreadstone helmet, it would reduce the damage down to 11.1. So Dreadstone is effectively better and can restore durability outside of combat, but requires killing a boss to acquire, and it drains your sanity when it's repairing, whereas the Commander's helm requires 5 skill points to get close to being as good as the Dreadstone helmet, though the Commander helm can be crafted on day 1 if you really try. Also, the Dreadstone helmet does not provide knockback resistance. Despite this, I would probably pick the Dreadstone helmet and not unlock the Commander's helmet to save the skill points, but we'll discuss this later. For now, the Commander helmet with all of its upgrades is comparable to the Dreadstone helmet, which makes it a very good helmet. Mystic Resilience. I saved Mystic Resilience for now since we have discussed planar damage and defense, but let's delve a little deeper. Mystic Resilience simply gives you 5 planar defense for free. So let's talk about how Wigfrid tanks things, since I think it's worth knowing how the calculations worked out so you can make better choices about what armor you should use. You can break down all defense multipliers into 4 categories: physical damage reduction, flat planar reduction, armor alignment resistance, and player resistance. Physical damage reduction is the most basic. Any physical damage is reduced by the reduction the percent the armor provides. So being hit by Dragonfly for 75 damage while wearing a football helmet, which absorbs 80% of the damage will be reduced to 15, while the helmet would absorb 60 damage, so therefore loses 60 durability. Flat planar reduction is flat, so not a percentage. So if Wilson is wearing just a Void Robe, which provides 80% physical damage reduction and a flat plus 10 planar defense, and is hit by Crystal Decops' Icicle, which deals 100 physical and 30 planar damage, the 100 physical will be reduced to 20 damage, and the Void Robe would lose 80 durability. Then the Void Robe will reduce the 30 planar damage by 10 down to 20 planar and loses 10 durability. So ultimately, it absorbed 90 damage, causing Wilson to get hit for 20 physical and 20 planar damage. Armor alignment resistance is like physical damage reduction, except it applies to all damage, so both physical and planar. This armor alignment resistance is relatively new and is usually a smaller multiplier, like 10%, and only applies when you're using armor which is aligned with the same faction as the enemy you're taking damage from. Lastly, we have player resistance. Basically, any damage you would have received after all the other defense multipliers, so after armor alignment resistance, physical damage reduction, and flat planar defense resistance has been applied, the player resistance multiplies against that incoming damage and reduces it. As an example, Wigfrid has a natural 25% player resistance. So if she got hit the same way Wilson did with a Crystal Decops Icicle while wearing a Void Robe, the Void Robe would lose the same 90 durability and reduce the incoming damage down to 40, but then Wigfrid's player resistance kicks in and reduces that incoming damage by 25%, multiplying it by 0.75, so she only gets hit for 30 damage rather than 40. That 10 damage is absorbed for free without any durability loss. This is particularly powerful against planar enemies, as any planar damage that tries to pierce your physical damage reduction will get reduced by your player resistance. Woody's moves has a natural 90% player resistance, so everything he gets hit by is reduced by 90%. Player resistance also reduces things like fire damage where normal armor does not protect you. I'm going to leave those explanations alone for now, but later, after we see all the possible damage multipliers left on the skill tree, we will investigate the most complicated damage taking formulas I could think of. Next is probably my favorite part of Wigfrid's skill tree, the Battle Rönd. This skill requires you to have unlocked either the Elding Spear or the Commander's Helmet skill before unlocking the Battle Rönd skill. This skill allows you to craft a shield, guess what it's called, that's right, the Battle Rönd, which costs 4 gold and 3 beefalo wool to craft. This shield provides 85% physical damage reduction, deals 51 damage when attacking with it, and has 420 durability. Though this shield can only be equipped and used by a Wigfrid that has the Battle Rönd skill enabled, so Wigfrid deals 63.75 damage with it. Firstly, the shield does have 420 durability, as in it can absorb 420 damage, but every time you attack with it, it uses 3 durability. So if it never absorbs any damage, you can attack with it 140 times before it breaks. Never getting hit while attacking with the shield would take a lot of kiting though, right? Well, no, the shield has another ability, which is amazing. Right-clicking on the screen anywhere where there's not a right-clicking option will activate the shield's ability. It will reveal a 178-degree semicircle in the direction of your cursor. After left-clicking, Wigfrid will brace herself behind the shield, entering a blocking stance for 1 second. During this 1 second, any attack you would receive originating from that 178-degree angle that you pointed your shield will be completely blocked, dealing no damage or knockback to Wigfrid and taking no durability from the shield. After this 1 second, Wigfrid will stop blocking and be able to move around again, and it really does block all damage, even planar damage. After this 1 second of blocking, or you block something, Wigfrid will stop blocking and you will be able to move around again. This is the most fun combat ability I've used in Don't Starve, and a lot of people may recognize this mechanic because it's very similar to that of the Thulecite Club in the Forge event, where it can also block attacks. Now, to get a little more mechanical, the shield's block ability has a hefty 10-second cooldown starting from when you enter the blocking stance. But once you block your first attack in the blocking stance, the cooldown is statically set to 3 seconds, regardless of how late or early you start the block. So you are punished for blocking too early or late, since if you enter the blocking stance and don't block anything, the shield's block cooldown does not get reduced. When equipping a shield, its ability goes on cooldown for 2 seconds, unless the shield already had a cooldown on it longer than 2 seconds. This means if you're fast, you can swap between 2 shields to block every 2 to 3 seconds, depending on the lag, rather than every 3 seconds with just 1 shield. Or even swap to a better weapon like a handbat or a dark sword, then 2 to 3 seconds before the boss attacks, switch back to your shield to continue attacking before blocking in time. But this 3-second cooldown is enough to block attacks with 1 shield from some bosses. Take a look at Dragonfly. You can do 8 hits and then block. You can do this repeatedly, only losing durability when you hit Dragonfly. This is really funny and feels rewarding to use, and it's satisfying each time you block correctly. Although in most scenarios versus bosses, it's usually better damage to just use a better weapon and dodge the boss's attacks. But in this example with Dragonfly, if I used a fresh handbat, I would deal 74.375 damage per hit, and I could hit 6 or 7 times before needing to dodge, dealing a total of 446 to 520 damage per round, depending how good my timing was. And I might still get hit. Whereas with the shield, I can always get 8 hits in per round before blocking, which deals 510 damage in total. This extra 8th hit is achievable because I save time by not needing to dodge. I simply activate the shield and block at the last second rather than running away and back. So I almost reached the handbat's DPS with perfect timing potential without needing to dodge. But let's not cast judgment on the shield quite yet, as the next 2 skills will give it a little bit more help. Battle Rönd Enhancement 1 simply says the duration of the Battle Rönd's ability to block attacks will be increased. This really is as simple as it says. It increases the blocking stance duration from 1 second up to 2.5 seconds. I say up to 2.5 seconds because upon entering the blocking stance, you are locked into the stance until 1 second has passed or after you successfully block. Then when you move or attack, it will cancel the blocking stance early, so you're not locked into blocking for the full 2.5 seconds if you don't want to. This skill is pretty neat as it allows a wider margin of error when you're blocking an enemy attack, but it also allows you to block some longer attacks like the Mermblender 3000 TM. That's right, the block duration is long enough that you can block basically almost every boss's attack, including Celestial Champion Phase 2 spinning attack, which lasts longer than a single second. And the shield only gets better. Battle Rönd Enhancement 2 says after blocking an attack with the Battle Rönd, your next attack within 5 seconds will deal 15 to 30 extra damage based on the damage blocked. How exactly does this extra damage work though? While in your blocking stance, you gain bonus damage based on the last attack's source damage that you blocked. So whatever damage you blocked, it cuts that damage in half and caps it at 30, and if it's less than 15, it sets it to 15. This is your bonus damage you get that is added onto your next hit as long as you hit something within 5 seconds after exiting the blocking stance. So if you got hit by a pigman while blocking for 33 damage, then you hit the pigman back, we cut the 33 damage in half, which equals 16.5, which is less than 30, so it doesn't get capped at 30, and it's greater than 15, so it isn't set to 15, so you deal an additional 16.5 damage back to the enemy combined with your regular damage. Except the 16.5 damage is affected by all your physical damage multipliers, so Wigfrid's default physical damage multiplier cranks the 16.5 up to 20.625, leading to dealing a total parry of 84.375 damage. So it's more accurate to say this parry skill skill deals an additional 18.75 to 37.5 damage. To get the minimum parry damage, you must block an attack. Funnily enough, even if the damage at source is 0 damage, you still get the minimum parry damage. But to get the maximum parry damage, you must have blocked 60 damage. Also, this 60 damage is damage at source, not the damage it would have dealt to you, so how much damage the enemy is actually unleashing. But don't get confused, as if you block 2 attacks from Pigmen in one block stance, the damage blocked equals 66, but you only get the damage bonus as if you blocked 33 damage. So the bonus parry damage is based on the last hit's damage at source that you blocked, not the total damage you blocked during the whole block stance. Anyway, how does this change the shield's DPS? Well, let's use the Dragonfly example again, since it consistently uses the block ability pretty fast. So the shield blocks Dragonfly 75 damage, then does 8 hits. The first of these 8 hits will deal an additional 30 damage, which is affected by Wigfrid's damage multipliers, so the total damage for all 8 hits, including the parry damage, is 547.5 damage. If Wigfrid were to use a handbat instead of doing 67 hits, then like we said before, you would deal 446.25 to 520.625 damage. So even if you perfectly did 7 hits and dodged with a handbat, the shield will still deal more damage. Though this of course changes if you use the Dark Sword and get 7 hits, or if you use Wigfrid's Charged Spear and do 6 to 7 hits. So after explaining all this, the shield is really fun to use and very satisfying to block with, but as soon as you unlock weapons like Dark Swords and anything better, including your best in slot Spear, those options will be better DPS than the shield. Except dodging is easier to mess up than blocking with the shield in my opinion, but so you might get hit less using the shield. Also the shield is just fun to use. But also I think the shield is really fun to use because you can use it really aggressively. You can be in a boss's face the entire time of the fight and you can just block last second to block the attack. I don't know, it's really fun, man. I love the shield. Next are some skills, all 4 of which are involving Beefalo. The first skill is Noble Mount 1. It says Beefalo are domesticated 15% faster. It really is that simple, or is it? Anytime you gain some domestication points, that domestication point is multiplied by 1.15 times, but this only applies to domestication points gained while riding the Beefalo. This is important as you can also gain domestication points by having your Beefalo's hunger above 0 while you're not riding it. So when you gain a domestication point via the Beefalo's hunger being above 0 and you are not riding the Beefalo, your domestication point does not get multiplied by 1.15 times. So yeah, that's an important detail that Arkwell told me. Thanks, Arkwell. Noble Mount 2 says you can ride Beefalo for 30% longer. This is pretty simple. While raising a Beefalo's domestication, you can't ride the Beefalo for very long, say like 30 seconds, but now you'll be able to ride it for 39 seconds with this skill active. Also, being able to ride the Beefalo for longer could mean that you miss less domestication ticks, which are points in time where a domestication point is given to you if you're riding the Beefalo, or failing that when the Beefalo's hunger is above 0. This could lead to domesticating a Beefalo a little faster than without the skill, but it's probably not a huge difference. When a Beefalo is fully domesticated though, it lets you ride them for 13 minutes and 20 seconds, and with the skill, they let you ride them for 17 minutes and 20 seconds. 13 minutes and 20 seconds is plenty of time, and this time is reset simply by getting off and back on the Beefalo. So this skill is kind of whatever, except if you're taming a Beefalo or you just really love Beefalo. Noble Mount 3 says riding a Beefalo will make your inspiration slowly rise until it reaches the halfway mark. This is a good skill if you use Beefalo, as you can be out of combat and have up to 50 inspiration, allowing you to have 1 passive song active even if you're not in combat. And after just 1 hit in combat, you can enable your second passive song. The inspiration gain you get while riding the Beefalo is 0.35 inspiration per second, and once you reach 50 inspiration, it stops going up. Reaching 50 inspiration takes 2 minutes and 23 seconds. Also, if you start riding your Beefalo while your inspiration is above 50, it won't drain. The drain is paused until you get off the Beefalo and about 3 seconds pass. Decent skill if you like Beefalo, also allows you to use songs in scenarios where you usually wouldn't be able to use them, like when you're out of combat. So specifically, you could use the Heartrending Ballad at the base, and you and your team could start hitting a punching bag to gain health back due to the song's effect. Thanks, Mr. Mither, for suggesting this a very epic strategy. Wow. Lastly, we have the Battle Saddle. This skill unlocks the Battle Saddle recipe. Who would have known? Wow. This saddle costs 4 gold, 3 marble, and 6 azure feathers. Yup, you'll need to kill some more winter birds. Luckily for you though, if you get your positioning right, you can use the Elding Spear's special attack to attack and kill birds. This saddle is interesting, but ultimately not very good in my opinion. Let's see why I think that. The saddle once on a Beefalo provides that Beefalo with 40% physical damage reduction, a 1.3 times speed bonus, and a flat 5 physical damage buff when it attacks. Firstly, the good. 40% physical damage reduction means your Beefalo with 1000 health can be attacked with 1666 damage before dying, rather than 1000 health before dying. Beefalo regenerates 6.9 health every 10 seconds, so 41 health per minute, regenerating all 999 health after 24 minutes, or 3 in-game days. So damage reduction is nice as Beefalo regenerate quite slowly without being fed non-meat healing food, which is 4 times more effective with Beefalo. Also, the durability on the saddle is not drained for absorbing damage for the Beefalo. It's the same as other saddles in that when it gets shaken off, that's when it takes away durability. An extra 5 damage might sound decent, but the war saddle is better as it grants 16 flat physical damage, but only grants a 1.25 times speed bonus. Put this on an honorary Beefalo and you're dealing 66 damage per hit. But if you want damage, it's better damage as Wigfrid to just not ride a Beefalo, as Wigfrid gets her free 1.25 times physical damage buff, out DPSing a Beefalo with a war saddle with just a handbat without animation cancelling. A 1.3 times speed bonus might sound good, but the default saddle, which you can craft with 4 Beefalo wool, 4 pigskin, and 4 gold, grants a 1.4 times speed bonus, but has no damage reduction. Or even better, the Gossamer Saddle, which grants a 1.55 times movement speed buff. I would choose this superior movement speed over damage reduction and bonus damage. But the Battle and War Saddle both have an ability which allows you to remount your B-Flow while the B-Flow is aggroed onto something. Without a saddle that grants this ability, like a normal saddle or a Gossamer Saddle, your B-Flow will refuse to let you ride them until they're not aggroed onto anything. This usually leads to your B-Flow perishing if they're trying to fight a boss. So yeah, if you like B-Flow, I would use a different saddle to kill things faster and therefore take less damage, or move faster and therefore dodge easier and therefore take less damage, but it's up to you. Lastly, we have Wigfrid's 2 affinity skills, starting with Shadow Chanteuse. I don't know how to say that. You're required to learn 12 skills and defeat Ancient Weaver while having no lunar affinity, after which you can unlock the skill. Doing so grants you the crafting recipe to make the song Dark Lament. This song costs 1 papyrus, 1 feather pencil, and 3 pure horror. This song is a passive song, which means it must be activated and attached to an inspiration threshold like the rest of the passive songs, and the song's mechanical effect is the following. You gain 10% player resistance towards shadow-aligned enemies, and you gain a universal 5% damage multiplier versus lunar-aligned enemies. The effect of universal damage multipliers and player resistance is also applied to all players and allies in a 3-tile radius like the rest of the passive songs. Unlocking the affinity also gives you a hidden 10% player resistance buff against shadow-aligned enemies, and a 1.1 times universal damage multiplier against lunar-aligned enemies, both of which are active all the time even without the song, but only for Wigfrid. Lunar Melodist is the same but for the opposite alignment. It has the same requirements except you must defeat Celestial Champion and not have a shadow alignment, and the song is called Enlightened Lullaby and costs 1 papyrus, 1 feather pencil, and 3 pure brilliance. This song's buff applies to you and your allies nearby and grants player resistance of 1.1 times against lunar-aligned enemies and a 1.05 universal damage multiplier versus shadow-aligned enemies, and you gain the hidden 1.1 times player resistance versus lunar-aligned enemies and a 1.1 times universal damage multiplier versus shadow-aligned enemies. We have unlocked an absurd amount of damage and defensive multipliers. Let's see how they interact with each other by coming up with 2 scenarios. One scenario where we fight a lunar enemy with all of our buffs to see how much damage we can do, and one scenario where we fight a shadow enemy with all of our buffs to see how the defensive multipliers work. In this damage scenario, let's hit a wet deadly Brightshade, which is a lunar aligned planar entity, with our charged Elding Spear and an Enlightened Crown, while we're shadow aligned with Dark Lament active, eating spicy meatballs. We're not eating spicy Voltgoat Schaufroid since our weapon is already dealing electric damage, so Voltgoat Schaufroid, which normally gives electric damage, would not do anything, like I said before. Hitting the deadly Brightshade with all these buffs makes us deal 95.6 damage plus the crown's 29.2 damage. So here's my spreadsheet which calculates the scenario out, but let's explain what's happening. Hell yeah, we love math. So we've broken everything down into their own categories. Firstly, our spear deals 59.5 physical damage and 20 planar damage. Next, we have all of our physical damage multipliers multiplied together. Those multipliers being Wigfrid's default 1.25 times multiplier, Elding Spear's 1.5 times multiplier for fighting a wet enemy, and the 1.2 times multiplier that Chili Spice provides. All multiplied together makes 2.25 times. Cool. Next is the universal multipliers. These are multipliers which apply to your entire damage, so both physical and planar. In this scenario, they are 1.05 times from Dark Lament's song while fighting a lunar-aligned enemy, and a 1.1 times multiplier from being shadow-aligned fighting a lunar-aligned enemy, multiplying together to make 1.155 times. In this scenario, there is no extra flat planar damage being applied to the weapon's planar, so that's 0. Same thing for flat physical damage. External physical damage is 42.5 since our Enlightened Crown will fire off Gestalt, which deals 42.5 physical damage, and this damage is not affected by our damage multipliers. And a deadly Brightshade is a planar entity. Now the damage calculation. We take our physical damage and add any flat physical damage to it, but we don't have any. Then multiply that sum by our physical damage multiplier, then multiply that by the universal damage multiplier, after which, since we're fighting a planar entity, our physical damage is reduced by this formula. So we encapsulate that entire physical damage calculation within that formula, giving us our total physical damage dealt. Then for the planar damage, we simply add together our planar damage and any flat planar damage, then multiply it by only the universal damage multiplier. Remember, physical damage multipliers like Wigfrid's default damage multiplier does not affect planar damage. Then we add the physical and planar damage together, and we have the total damage dealt to the enemy in that scenario, which is 124.79. In game, you can see that we deal 95.6 damage with our spear, and then the Gestalt deals a separate instance of damage being 29.19, but rounded up to 29.2. And these two together, we deal a total of 124.79 damage, which is what the spreadsheet says. Nice! Just for fun, the same scenario but against a non-planar wet lunar aligned enemy, we deal 177.73 damage plus a full 42.5 damage from the Enlightened Crown, totaling 220.23 damage. Neat. Hope that makes it easy to understand how all the damage multipliers affect your damage. But how do all these multipliers affect my defense? Let's explore one of the more complicated defensive scenarios I could think of. This scenario is your shadow-aligned Wigfrid with Mystic Resilience, wearing a Dreadstone helm and body, with Dark Lament active, eating garlic-spiced meatballs, being hit by the Ink Blight with wings. Let's explore the Excel gaming once again. The physical damage at source is 25, and the planar damage at source is 30. The player resistance is Wigfrid's natural 25%, Shadow Alignment versus Shadow enemies 10%, Dark Lament versus Shadow enemies 10%, and Garlic Spiced 0.3% recurring. Multiplying these together gives us a total player resistance multiplier of 0.405. Dreadstone helm and body both give 90% physical damage reduction, but these these damage reductions don't stack or multiply together, so this multiplier is 1 minus 90%, so 0.1. Flat planar defense is the plus 5 planar defense from each Dreadstone armor piece, totaling 10, plus the plus 5 planar defense from Mystic Resilience, totaling 15 flat planar defense. Armor alignment resistance is 10% when using a shadow armor piece versus a shadow aligned enemy, and since we're wearing 2 Dreadstone pieces, that multiplier multiplies against another copy of itself, giving us a 0.81 multiplier. Now we get the physical damage, multiply it by the armor alignment resistance, which doesn't eat away at your armor's durability, then multiply by the physical damage reduction, which does eat away at your armor's durability, then multiply that entire result by the player's resistance, which doesn't eat away at your armor's durability. For the planar damage, we multiply it by the armor alignment resistance, which again doesn't reduce the armor durability, then subtract the flat planar defense, 10 out of 15 of which is provided by armor, so eats away at 10 durability, and then multiply that result by the player resistance multiplier. Adding the physical and planar damage together, we're hit for a grand total of 0.82 physical damage and 3.7665 planar damage, totaling 4.586625 damage. Wow. So we effectively reduced the damage down to 6.8% of the original damage, or 93% damage reduction. Wow, but we can do even better. Let's see how much Wigfrid can tank versus Crystal Deerclops, who is Lunar aligned, but with Bright Shade armor. So being Lunar aligned with the Enlightened Lullaby active, eating garlic spiced meatballs, wearing full Bright Shade being the body and helm, with Mystic Resilience unlocked and getting hit by Crystal Deerclops' Eye Icicle, which at source deals 100 physical and 30 power damage. How much damage will we get hit for? 50 damage? 30 damage? Maybe 10 damage? Well, no, that 130 damage gets reduced to 6.075 damage, all of which is physical damage. That is a huge 95.3% reduction in damage in this instance. Due to the set effect for Bright Shade, which provides a 0.75 times armor alignment resistance against lunar enemies, and has plus 10 power defense with each piece, which is huge, leading us to reduce 130 damage down to 6.075. Anyway, so yeah, Wigfrid is tanky as heck with all this new endgame gear, and I just wanted to prove it with those examples. Hopefully the examples helped explain how all the damage multipliers work and defensive multipliers work. You can play with the spreadsheet in the description to test various scenarios. Yes. Now it's time for Wigfrid's recommended skill trees. I'm going to recommend 2 different skill trees. One for a beginner who will only be killing seasonal bosses and will not be accessing endgame content locked behind non-seasonal bosses. And the second skill tree for someone who is comfortable taking out more bosses than just the seasonal ones. So the beginner tree. I would spend the first point on unlocking Encore if you're playing with a team, otherwise it's useless. The second point on the battle call Canister, as you want to try and acquire all your passive songs as soon as possible once you get into the game to support your team, and storing the songs in this container will be mighty convenient. The next 2 points being spent on Bragi's Blessing 1 and 2 to increase your inspiration gain, followed by the Elding Spear skill and Elding Spear Enhancement 1. Though since you won't be defeating non-seasonal bosses, you won't be able to upgrade the spear using the second enhancement skill, which also allows you to be able to recharge it. So use the spear very sparingly, and perhaps only when you get maximum damage out of it when you're fighting wet enemies. Also remember that the special attack does not consume durability, so you can use a different weapon and then swap into the spear to use the special attack as much as you want. The next 2 skills I would unlock would be the Battle Rönd and the Battle Rönd Enhancement 1, but this is personal preference, as I think the shield is good for early to mid game, and it's just great fun to use, but you don't have to unlock it, of course. Next, we'll unlock the 2 helmet skills to make your hats more durable, so you use less of them, then the Commander's Helmet and the Commander's Helmet Enhancement 2, while ignoring this first enhancement. Your last 3 points I would spend on the first 3 B-Flow skills, but only if you actually like B-Flow and are going to use them to make a riding B-Flow, as I would only use this B-Flow for getting around the map fast and not for fighting. So try to train the B-Flow into being a rider B-Flow by riding it around a lot. If you don't like B-Flow though, or won't use them, then use your last 3 skill points on whatever you want. May I suggest the Battle Rönd Enhancement 2, one of the 2 affinities if you have them unlocked, but they do require bosses to unlock, and Mystic Resilience or Commander Helmet Enhancement 1, even though you probably won't be taking any plan damage. A quick discussion of Commander's Helm Enhancement 1 versus Mystic Resilience. They both provide flat planar defense, and that defense is applied at the same time on the formula, so the Commander's Helm 1 is technically better as it provides 8 planar defense versus Mystic Resilience's 5, but you must be wearing the Commander's Helm and it will use its durability, but Mystic Resilience is always active and costs no durability, so I would go with Mystic Resilience, but it's up to you. Now, the skill tree for an experienced player who is comfortable killing bosses. Encore and Battle Call Canister would still be unlocked first, then fully upgrade the Spear branch as you can rush the Moonstorms as early as winter or earlier if you know how, followed by all the shield upgrades as the shield is the best in the early game against specific bosses and removes the margin of error for dodging. But this is personal preference, of course. I love the shield and you don't need to unlock it. We're going to completely ignore the helmet upgrades, as I'll assume that with this Wigfrid will be killing the Nightmare Werepig for the Dreadstone helmet early on, which is very similar if not better than the Commander's helmet with all of its upgrades, but the Dreadstone Dreadstone helmet does not cost any skill points. Next, we'll unlock the 3 B-Flow skills for a Rider B-Flow to explore the world fast. Then finally, we'll unlock Mystic Resilience and one of the 2 affinities. This is probably the skill tree I'll use in Wigfrid's next boss rush, so look forward to that. But Jakey, which affinity is better? Well, usually I recommend the Lunar affinity since you get free damage against nightmare creatures, which is still true, but Wigfrid's song gives everyone a 5% universal damage multiplier, which, with more than 2 players, is more damage than the hidden buff the affinity gives to Wigfrid. And where do you usually use songs? Against bosses. And currently the Lunar bosses have a higher health pool than all of the Shadow bosses, so you'll get more damage out of the Dark Lament song, so I'd recommend the Shadow affinity, but it's up to you. So the conclusion, Wigfrid is even stronger now than before, offering a few support skills and a new best in slot weapon, with a very fun, not so best in slot weapon being the Battle Rönd. I like the skill tree, though if you're an experienced player, the skill selection is pretty straightforward, and you don't really need to sacrifice anything to get everything you want out of the skill tree. So yes, good skill tree. Anyway, yes, that's it. Very cool. Thanks to my Twitch and Discord community for helping me test things in-game, and thanks to Arkwell for being a consultant checking some values and mechanics, including helping with the damage and defensive multipliers, along with reviewing the script. So thank you, Arkwell. Otherwise, all the values I found in the code to make sure they are right. If I got something wrong or inaccurate or something changes, the corrections will be included in the pinned comment. Leave any tips for Wigfrid players in the comments, and the next video will be Willow's skill tree guide. So go ahead and leave suggestions, tips and mechanics for her guide, and I may include them in that video. Thanks for watching. I'm leaving now. Goodbye. Wow, I love Final Fantasy. Wow.